Hey y'all, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about, we're doing our 5.7 notes. We're going to be talking about completing the square. We're going to do a quick review on that, look through the process, and then we're also going to combine it with solving by square roots. So just like in the last video, we are taking factoring and then solving from factored form, putting them together. We're doing the same thing today, but we're talking about vertex form. So first, a quick review of our vertex form. This is what it's going to look like. We might have a number to the outside, so we can say that could be our A value. And this is going to highlight our vertex. Comes straight from the name. Vertex form highlights our vertex. When we're looking at our vertex, we can come up here to our equation. We can pull out our vertex is going to be H, comma, K. Remember, we change the sign of whatever is inside the parentheses, and then we keep the sign of what's on the outside. So that's just a quick review of vertex form. Now we're going to talk about the process of completing the square. Just like when we were factoring, the equation has to be set equal to 0. And for this process, it has to be in standard form. So it has to look like something like x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. This is standard form, set equal to 0. Next, we're going to identify the values of A, B, and C from the standard form. This is what we did with factoring. It's the same first two steps. Step 3 is where it gets a little different. We're going to determine the value of b over 2 squared. So if we looked up here, our a is 1. It's going to be the coefficient right here. If there's nothing, we can say it's a 1. Our b is going to be 2 next to the x. Our c is 1. So when we look at the value of b over 2 squared, we're going to take our b value and put it in. So it's going to be 2 over 2 squared, which gives me 1 squared, which is 1. So we found our value of b over 2 squared here is 1. We're going to put 2 blanks on either side of the c. When we look at our equation, we're going to have x squared plus 2x. We're going to put a blank here. We're going to keep our c value and another blank, all set equal to 0. With these blanks, the first one is going to be positive. The second is negative. It's very important we keep them in the right order. So there's going to be a positive here and a negative here. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to fill in the blank. We're going to put the value that we just found, b over 2 squared, into that blank. So right here we can put, we saw b over 2 squared right here is 1 squared. Just so we can see it, we're going to write it as 1 squared. Yes, it is the same thing as just 1, but just so we can see that it's the whole thing squared. Put it in here. All right, we're down to our last step for rewriting it into vertex form. We can find the first 3 terms and put them into a form. We're going to say it's x plus b over 2 all squared. Notice that this is not b over 2 squared. So it's just going to be this part right here, what's inside. So if we look up here, we can rewrite these first 3 terms. I'm going to write it over here a little bit bigger so we can see. We're going to write it as x plus my b over 2 is 2 over 2, which is 1. What's inside the parentheses? So x plus 1 all squared. And then our second step of this is to combine the last 2 constants. So I can do 1 minus 1, which gives me 0. So I don't have to write anything. Still an equation, so it is set equal to 0. From here, it's in vertex form, so I should be able to identify the vertex pretty easily. Real quickly, let's talk about this. There's no k value here, so our k value will be 0. So our h value is going to be negative 1 because we have to change the sign. Our k value is 0. So we can write our vertex is negative 1, comma 0. So we walked through the process of completing the square. And now we're going to do 2 examples and combine it with solving. So let's go down here to our examples. This first one, step 1, make sure the equation is set equal to 0 and in standard form. This looks like factored form and it's not set equal to 0. So to get from our factored form to our standard form, we have to distribute. So we're going to take this x and multiply it by everything in the second expression. So I'm going to do x times x gives me x squared. X times 4 gives me 4x. And then I have to do the same thing with my negative 2. Notice I take the negative with me. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. We still have this 3 over here. We want it set equal to 0. So to move this 3 over, I can subtract 3 from both sides. So I'm just going to write it as negative 8 minus 3 equals 0. I combine two steps right here. All right, so we can rewrite it. We can combine all of our like terms. So I'm going to have my x squared. I can combine my x's. Plus 2x, negative 8 and negative 3 becomes negative 11 equals 0. So now I look, all right, it's set equal to 0. Check, it's in standard form. We can move on. All right, step 2. After a while, you might be able to start skipping step 2 and do it in your head. But for now, let's write it out. A is 1, B is 2, C is negative 11. Notice I keep the negative with it. We're looking at these coefficients still. Step 3, it's going to ask me what's the value of b over 2 squared. So let's put in our b value. We end up getting 1 squared, which is 1. All right, we're almost there. Let's go up here and rewrite it up here. There's not a ton of space here, so kind of try to do 2 columns, and then we'll end up using this space down here a little bit later. All right, so let's come up here. We're going to do step 4. We're going to insert our blanks. We're going to have x squared plus 2x plus blank minus 11 minus blank. It's all set equal to 0. Sorry, I write really big. We're kind of running out of room. I'll give you more space on the next set of notes, I promise. So next we're going to fill in these blanks. That's step 5. We're going to take our value of b over 2 squared. So that's 1 squared. Plug them in. Rewrite these first 2 terms, or first 3 terms. We can do x plus b over 2 all squared. So my value of b over 2 is 1. So I can do x plus 1 all squared. And then I have to combine my last 2 constants. So negative 11 minus 1 is minus 12 equals 0. From here, if it asks me for my vertex, I change the sign of what's inside, negative 1. Then I keep the sign on the outside, negative 12. So this is my vertex. All right, we're going to skip this second one for now. I'm not too concerned about it. It's from standard form. I wanted us to be able to see this of how we get to standard form, so that's why we did this one. But this is going to be the same process. Go ahead and try it, follow these steps, and then answer the Edpuzzle question on it. All right, next we're going to talk about solving equations from factored form. We're going to use solving by square roots. Just like how completing the square was review, this should also be review. We just did this with our solving quadratic equations section, solving by square roots. We're going to go ahead and do this one all together. So when we're solving by square roots, we're going to start from the vertex form. So we found our vertex form right here, right? I'm going to rewrite it down below so we have a little bit more room to work with it. If I have my x plus 1 squared minus 12 equals 0, this is just my vertex form from this equation, rewritten. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to move this 12 over. My goal is to get this expression by itself. So I'm going to add 12 to both sides. I'm left with x plus 1 squared equals 12. Now that I have this, since this is squared, I'm going to do the inverse operation. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. When I take this square root, my squared and my square root cancel out. They're inverse operations. So I'm left with x plus 1 equals, when I have a square root on this side, remember that whenever we're doing inspection, we had 2 solutions. It's going to be the same. We're going to have plus or minus square root of 12. I'm okay if you leave it as the square root of 12. You can simplify it if you want, but this isn't wrong. On an EOC, you might see it simplified, so it might be worth to try simplifying that. All right, I'm almost done. My last step, I have to get x by itself. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, and I'm left with x equals -1 plus or minus the square root of 12. Notice that my -1 is in front of this plus minus. It's going to be very important. The plus minus is going to come at the end of whatever's on this side. So this is my solution. So now we can see that we were able to complete the square and combine it with solving by square roots. So we can now start with something in standard or factored form and not only find the vertex, but we can also find our answer for x. All right, go ahead and finish answering the Edpuzzle questions. If you need it to be reset, you should have unlimited attempts, so you should not need to message us on Schoology.